Hi everybody and welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
And in today's article, it's a 2-day article and we're going to be looking at 2 different ways that kind of people have been doing things differently during the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of people have had to change completely the way they live their lives. We're going to kind of focus in on 2 of these. Anything that you've really done differently this past sort of 12 months?
Not seen my family.
Right.
And of course, not gone home.
Yeah,
and
of course in Taiwan we escaped the worst of
Yes.
it and there were only sort of short periods
Yes.
where we really needed to do things differently.
Right. Washing my hands more, I think, which is, good advice almost any time of the year.
Right.
Or any, no matter what's going on. And now I find that, when you do that sort of pocket check before you go out, keys, money,
Right.
cell phone, mask.
Yes.
It's part of that. It's almost automatic. So
Yeah,
my
mask
wife
and-
still says, "Did you bring a mask?" And now I'm like, "Of course I
Yep.
did."
Mask
Am I
and
wearing
hand-
shoes? It's just part of your natural
Yeah.
life now. So.
Hand sanitizer.
Oh, really? You use more of that?
Yeah, I've got a bottle of stuff in my backpack that I go
Okay.
to work with and stuff, so it's always there if I need to kind of pull it out and
Right.
have a bit of a spray, especially after using the bus or the MRT, that kind of
I
thing.
always use the bathroom at the MRT usually
Yeah, good
after I
plan.
get off. So.
At AMC here, we worked from home for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we sort of allowed working from home. So
Right.
that during that period of sort of last March to May when it was at its worst here, and there were actual local cases, we had a lot of people working from home due to COVID. But what else has been going on around the world? Let's look at a couple of examples. And in day 1, we're heading to Italy.
Reading.
Italy reopens its wine windows during COVID-19. People in Italy are noticing something interesting when they go out for a glass of wine. Along the old stone walls of a bar or cafe, a hand pops out of a tiny hole. It passes a drink or a whole bottle to a customer. The hole is then shut with a small wooden door. These are wine windows, and they help protect servers from COVID-19. These windows aren't new. They were a necessity in bars and restaurants about 400 years ago to protect people from the bubonic plague. That disease killed about a third of Europe's population. Since then, wine windows have been nothing more than historical features on ancient structures. However, hundreds of them have become useful again during the current epidemic. Not only wine, but also food and other drinks are served this way. Italians are enjoying seeing this tradition come back to life. It's possible that wine windows will continue to be used after the epidemic is over.
So, the article begins by saying people in Italy are noticing something interesting when they go out for a glass of wine. So wine, of course, is an alcoholic drink made of grapes. They smash up the grapes. They use a bit of yeast with the sugars to turn that into alcohol. You get red wine, you get white wine, you get rosé wine, which is kind of pinkish. Champagne is a type of wine, so you can have the fizzy stuff and the other stuff. A very popular drink around the world and very much in Italy, where there's a lot of wine growing and grape culture. And so what people will often do there with friends or family members in the past was go to a wine bar or a nice restaurant and enjoy a glass of wine and some good company. Here's another example sentence using wine. Since it was her birthday, Sheila decided to have a glass of wine with her dinner.
Okay.
So what are they noticing when they go out for a glass of wine?
Well, yeah, normally you would go out for a glass of wine the same way you might go out for, of course, a beer in a pub or a coffee in a coffee shop or something. You meet, a waiter comes over, you order, you sit at a table, they bring your drink, and then you sit there with your friends and enjoy it, right? But it says here, along the old stone walls of a bar or cafe, a hand pops out of a tiny hole. That's not the way you would normally expect to see someone serving wine. A hand popping out of a tiny hole in a wall.
Right.
Very strange.
And we see that it, so the hand, passes a drink or a whole bottle to a customer. It's like, here's a glass of wine, or here's an entire bottle of wine, and that's it.
Then the hole is then shut with a small wooden door. I like the little wooden door. That's very cute.
Yeah.
That they close after you've taken your drink. So what are these things?
Well, these are wine windows.
Of course they are.
Yes, it's a pretty obvious name for them. These are wine windows, and they help protect servers from COVID-19.
Okay.
So, of course, a server, this is a general term for a person who serves customers in a restaurant. We could obviously use waiter, waitress for that kind of thing. Wait staff will do for a sort of a whole group. The word could also be used for people who work in other places that serve customers. You could have a server working behind, say, the popcorn area of a movie theater or something like that.
All right, so there you go, wine windows. And yes, this is a COVID-19 thing. Now, you might think that this is something was sort of invented during the COVID-19 crisis or period that we're living through now, like all the masks people wear, people washing their hands or using food delivery services much more. Well, actually, no, they've been around a while, these wine windows. They're just becoming more popular. It says these windows aren't new.
And we found out how long in the next sentence. It says, they were a necessity in bars and restaurants about 400 years ago to protect people from the bubonic plague. Now, we'll learn about that in a moment, but first let's look at the word necessity. Necessity is the noun form of the adjective necessary. Of course, if something is necessary, you need it. It's a requirement. So, for example, if you go mountain climbing, then equipment, proper equipment, good boots, and maybe even oxygen, these are all necessities. If you're heading to school, pens, pencils, and books are necessities. And here's another example in a sentence. Harry is a professional athlete. So for him, daily exercise is a necessity. It's a necessary thing that he has to do.
7 days a week. He can't feel lazy someday because he's a pro athlete. All right. So, yes, it was a necessity 400 years ago because of the plague, the bubonic plague. What is a plague? Basically, a plague is a terrible disease that spreads throughout the population. Many people get it, and many people will die from it. And I think if you look at human history, the bubonic plague is probably the most deadly plague that humans have ever faced. It kind of went around the world over several hundreds of years, from like the 1300s up to about the 1600s.
Yeah, strictly speaking, if you're into science, a plague is caused by a bacteria. It's just the way, that's one of the things about it. It's a bacterial disease rather than a viral one. So we learn a bit more about the bubonic plague. The article says that disease killed about a third of Europe's population.
Wow.
So we can see how deadly it was. There are 3 people, and one of those people will die of the plague during that time. So you can see it's a huge number. And when we talk about it, we need to use the word population. The word population means the total number of people living in a particular area. That could be a country, a city, a town, the south of a country, that kind of thing. The population of Taiwan is like 22, 23 million, something like that. You could use it for animals. You could talk about animal populations, insect, bird, whatever populations. Here, of course, we're talking about people. And here's another example of this. In the next 50 years, Japan's population will probably get smaller.
So there you go. 400 years ago, when they had a problem with the plague in Italy, people used these wine windows as a way of staying healthy. Now, since then, we haven't had a lot of plagues or diseases or things like that. So they weren't really using them much. As it says, since then, since the plague 400 years ago, wine windows have been nothing more than historical features on ancient structures. The kind of way you might see something that people used to tie a horse up to, or a place that people used to, use in a farm, but now they have machines on the farm. They don't use these things anymore. So a historical feature on an ancient structure. Nothing more than that. When we look at it today, it's nothing more than something that's interesting. It's not used now. It's not important now. It's something a lot of people might not even notice or know about now. It's simply this thing.
Yeah, and instead of thing, we're saying it's a feature. A feature is a special part or a characteristic of something that often many people think of when they think about this thing. It's an interesting or certainly a notable or noticeable part of the overall. So we could say, for example, outdoor cafes are one of the features of Paris that tourists most enjoy. Everybody's kind of heard about them, they know about them, they're a popular part of the overall idea that is Paris. Here, they're a historical feature, so an old thing, an old, unusual thing about these structures.
Yes, these ancient structures. What is a structure? It's a building. Basically, that's all it is. It covers lots of different buildings or even things that people put up. So, of course, we could talk about a house or a skyscraper, a school, a hospital. These are structures. Of course, these are buildings. But we could also include bridges in there. We could include lots of other things. Basically, they're not natural things. For example, it looks like they're building a new structure on the corner. Do you know what it's going to be? A hotel, a shopping mall, a school, a hospital? What's that structure going to be?
So yeah, that was all these wine windows were, kind of little doors in buildings. It was something they might, oh yeah, that was an old wine window. We don't use it for anything anymore. But now they are being used. We see in the article, however, hundreds of wine windows, have become useful again during the current epidemic. So an epidemic is when a disease affects a large number of people and spreads to many areas. We can certainly call COVID-19 an epidemic. We can probably call it a pandemic because it's going all over the world. That's what a pandemic would be, an epidemic that's gone global.
Absolutely. And it says not only wine, but also food and other drinks are served this way. Okay, so people are using it today, of course, to serve wine. That makes sense since it's a wine window. But it's not only wine. It's not just wine, but also, what other things? Food and other drinks. So if you order a coffee or a Coca-Cola, if you order a plate of food, maybe not the largest pizza there because they might not fit that through the window. But if you ordered a plate of pasta or something like that, they'll also serve it through the window.
Now, in that sentence, we use today's grammar point, which is the use of not only blah, 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 but also blah, blah, blah. And the not only but also structure is used to show that two or more things are true or two or more things are included in a particular group or under a particular subject. We could also say both A and B in the same way. So we could say both wine and food and other drinks are served in this way to take the sentence from our article. It's a fairly simple structure to use, but one thing that often confuses people is what verb form should you use if the two different subjects are singular and plural. So in our sentence, we have wine, which is singular, food, which is singular, and drinks, which is plural. So what form of the verb should we use? Well, the answer is we use the form of the verb to match the subject closest to it. So the verb in our sentence is the verb be. The closest subject to that verb is the noun drinks. Drinks is plural, so therefore we would use the plural form of be, are. Not only wine, but also food and other drinks are served this way. We wouldn't use is here. Here's another example of that. Not only the students, but also the class teacher is feeling unwell after eating the school lunch. The verb to be was closest to the noun teacher, that's singular, so we use is, not are, even though the first subject in the sentence was the students, plural.
There you go. So, Italians, as we continue, it says, are enjoying seeing this tradition come back to life. Well, that's good. We're using these wine windows again after hundreds of years. If something comes back to life, but of course that doesn't really happen in nature, but we could use it to talk about things that from the past that, aren't done anymore, aren't used anymore. Music that comes back to life, music that was written hundreds of years ago and no one has played much, and some musicians decide to do it, or a style of cooking or a kind of food that maybe people don't eat much anymore. And, people who are interested in it want to try to do it again or bring some of that history back.
Yeah, and Italians are enjoying it. It's like, hey, this is quite cool. This is the way things used to be done. It's an interesting little feature. Maybe it sort of speeds up the whole experience and makes it easier to get served and go off and take your food home. So that's why we say in our conclusion, it's possible that wine windows will continue to be used after the epidemic is over. And continue, of course, means to keep going, to not stop. Whatever is going on will keep going on. It won't change. It won't go back to the way things were. It'll be like, no, let's keep these wine windows for anybody who is passing by and wants to get a glass of wine or a sandwich or something, but doesn't want to stop in the restaurant. Maybe they just want to take it home or take it to the park for a picnic or something else like that. Here's another example using the verb continue. Do you think we should continue wearing masks on the MRT even after the COVID-19 crisis has passed? Good question. Not one we're going to deal with right now. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. But we've got another question coming up in our For You Chat question section.
For You Chat.
So these wine windows are kind of protecting servers from customers who might have COVID, and maybe the other way around, customers who are being protected from servers who might have it but maybe aren't showing the signs. So that brings us to the question, how has the COVID-19 epidemic changed the way you, so us, we, deal with servers and store clerks?
It hasn't one bit.
Probably not so much in Taiwan, no.
Not really. I don't think it would anywhere. I would assume, as long as they're wearing masks, I would assume that they wash their hands. I certainly would.
I saw a lot of plastic gloves for a while.
Okay, yeah. I think as long as they're taking the necessary steps to keep themselves clean and safe and keep me safe, I think that's all fine. So, as long as people are being professional and smart, I don't think it would change much about the way I deal with them. Sometimes here, if they're explaining what the food is or asking questions, if I can't see their mouth and the restaurant's a little noisy, I have to say, I'm sorry, what did you say? Or, I have to kind of smile and go, yes.
Yeah.
Because just generally with people, when they're wearing masks, you can't always hear as clearly what they're saying. But that's just a general problem, not something that's only a thing in restaurants or stores.
Yeah, I've seen a few more places who are, rather than having money change hands person to person, they're putting it in little trays. And I've seen a lot more places that have put up sort of temporary plastic screens between either server and customer or person who collects the money at the end or just around tables. I was talking with my family and they say that in the UK, normally when you go to a bar in the UK, to get a drink, you actually have to walk up to the bar and order it. That's just pretty typical.
Yep.
And one of the things I noticed when I first moved to Taiwan all those years ago is that most bars have table service. People will come over to the table, get your order.
Right.
And the UK is now getting that in more of its bars. The staff are coming over to the table, and that's not to protect the servers or those customers. It's just to stop the clients from mixing with each other.
Right. Everyone's lined up at the bar and close to each other.
They want to keep the groups of people separate, so the table service in pubs is something which I never had when I lived in the UK, but now it's there. And of course, I've been enjoying it in Taiwan for 12 years, so I think it's a good thing. But there you go.
Interesting.
Yeah, and maybe creates jobs as well, as they maybe employ more staff members to make sure they've got enough people there. So in a time when a lot of people have lost sort of those jobs due to COVID, restaurants shutting down. Maybe if it creates a few more jobs in that industry, so much the better.
That could be a good thing.
Okay, well, that's all we've got for today, but join us again tomorrow for another look about how a different aspect of life has changed due to COVID. See you then. Bye for now.
Italy reopens its wine windows during COVID-19. People in Italy are noticing something interesting when they go out for a glass of wine. Along the old stone walls of a bar or cafe, a hand pops out of a tiny hole. It passes a drink or a whole bottle to a customer. The hole is then shut with a small wooden door. These are wine windows, and they help protect servers from COVID-19. These windows aren't new. They were a necessity in bars and restaurants about 400 years ago to protect people from the bubonic plague. That disease killed about a third of Europe's population. Since then, wine windows have been nothing more than historical features on ancient structures. However, hundreds of them have become useful again during the current epidemic. Not only wine, but also food and other drinks are served this way. Italians are enjoying seeing this tradition come back to life. It's possible that wine windows will continue to be used after the epidemic is over.
Vocabulary Review. Wine. Annie started to feel a bit drunk after her third glass of white wine during dinner. Necessity. You can't go camping without certain necessities like a tent and a sleeping bag. Population. Penghu has a population of about 100,000 people. Feature. The best feature of my new refrigerator is that I can control the temperature with my phone. Structure. Ben is an engineer who helps maintain bridges, railway stations, and other important structures. Continue. Clara wasn't feeling well at the office, but she continued to work instead of going home to rest.
智慧小补帖
Server. Plague. Epidemic.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net